Hi everybody, happy Easter. I hope that you all had a nice spring break and that you are still enjoying that time with your families and your friends and being able to rest and rejuvenate and get some energy back to go back into these last few weeks of school. We're starting to wind down here. I feel like always after spring break it went really, really quick, but it was also really kind of a difficult time of year. So you're almost there. And I hope that this week you were able to spend some time connecting back to nature and maybe finding some forms of movement that bring you joy and happiness. I know that it was probably a busy time period because I feel like with all of these breaks, we try so hard to cram in all the things that we've been neglecting to do for months. So I do hope that you were able to create some space to find that movement. And I'm looking forward to reading your reflections. And just a reminder that the Mind Body Green article discussion and that Go Move and Play weekly reflection, those are both going to be due by tomorrow at 11:59 p.m. So if you didn't get a chance to get those into me, just make sure that you get those in as soon as you can. And then this week, our week 6 topic and what we're moving into is connecting and contribution. And so this one I originally was thinking in terms of relationships and how we connect with our significant others and those really important people in our lives. And that's definitely going to be a piece of this. But I was thinking about all the things that I've read and things that I've listened to. And I decided to use a podcast and kind of a person that I can really relate to when it comes to those concepts. And his name is Jonathan Fields. So I first listened to this podcast a few years ago. Rich Roll, who is a podcast host who I absolutely adore. I think that he has an amazing way of getting people to really open up and move a conversation forward, and it's just a really nice thing to listen to. So the way that he kind of orchestrates and organizes his interviews. So this man, Jonathan Fields, he started this project, website, blog, company called The Good Life Project, and he's done a lot of work on this idea of the fact that we have these buckets that make up a good life. And so in the description on Canvas, you'll see kind of a background of what their conversation is. But what these buckets kind of are within this podcast and within this company are vitality, which is basically like your state of mind and body. And I think we've been doing a really nice job these last 5 weeks on that. We've talked about mindfulness, we've talked about movement, we talked about all these things that are really good for our mind and body. And then the second bucket is called connection, and this is truly your relationships. And that third bucket is contribution. So how do you contribute to the world? I think I mentioned this before, but there's been a lot of talk about purpose and passion and meaning, and I'm intentional about that, kind of giving you some threads to help you think about that. But I also don't want you to get overwhelmed with the idea of finding your life's purpose. I think I mentioned before that I think that all people share a common purpose, and that common purpose is really two things, and that's self-actualization. So finding out the best version of you and all the things that you can do in your life to be that person. And then the second piece is how we contribute. So once we have that self-actualization, how are we able to share our gifts and use them in a way to help society and move, people forward? So I don't think that you have to necessarily find your life's purpose, because that can seem very overwhelming and almost paralyzing for some people. But I do think that each day you can ask yourself, what can I do now with a sense of purpose or on purpose? Or how can I seek to be on purpose? And by doing small things for each day, living on purpose, one thing maybe even each day, in months and years down the road, you're going to be able to connect these dots and I think find that higher calling. And I do believe that when you're living on purpose, you do find more joy and happiness in your life. So something that I've definitely been threading through this course, and I hope that you've had some time to kind of think about that and process that. And this week is a little bit more of that. So your assignments this week, the first one is going to be to listen to that podcast. There's a link directly on Canvas. It'll say podcast, Jonathan Fields, Buckets for a Good Life. You click on it, the link takes you to Apple iTunes, where you can listen to the podcast right from there. You can also go to Rich Roll's website, and I think he does a video conference with him. The second thing is, I'm going to give you 3 different surveys, and I'm not going to grade you on these because I know that I've given you a lot of surveys and self-reflections and self-assessments. I do that for you and not necessarily for me. So the 3 that I'm going to do are ones that I've taken that I found value in, and they do surround this topic of filling your buckets for a good life. So you can take 0, you can take 1, you can take 2, you can take all 3. All it's going to do is just give you some more information about the things that fill you up, and I hope move you closer to that purpose and meaning, and that why we get up in the morning. So the first one is a Spark type quiz, and there's a link directly on that. My Spark type is a Sage, which I can explain a little bit later, but it's basically like the essential nature of work specifically that fills you with meaning. So I don't think necessarily you're going to take this and be like, oh, I'm not supposed to be a teacher. In fact, I think that you're probably going to recognize that you're exactly in the place you're supposed to be, but maybe how to use some of your strengths to be a better teacher or be better able to connect with your staff and your students. So just an interesting one that I really like to take. So there's a link in there for that. And then going back to that relationships piece and that connection piece, really focusing on first, like kind of like what your social or orientation is. So are you like introverted, extroverted, maybe something in between? And then once you recognize what your personality type is, being able to embrace that and then use that in order to connect better with others. So there is a personality test called Quiet Revolution Personality Test that will give you some information on that piece. The other thing is, the last one is a Good Life Bucket Snapshot tool. So this is like how full or empty those specific 3 buckets are. And it just gives you a couple questions that shows you maybe which areas, vitality, connection, or contribution, you should kind of focus on. And because you're going to be listening to the podcast, and I think it'll make more sense to you, that might be something that you're interested in taking as just another way to get like some self-assessment. So those are the 3 quizzes. Again, it's not a grade. I just think that it's going to be useful and helpful for you. So I would love you to take those. But if you don't or don't have time, or maybe you just want to take one that speaks to you, totally fine. And then the last piece of this week is just that connection piece. And instead of a reflection this week, I'm going to actually ask you to focus your attention on thinking of someone in your life who adds value. So someone you're grateful for but might not have time to call or tell them or have a conversation with them. And I would love for you to create space to connect with this person. Face-to-face is always the best option. So if you can meet them for coffee, or you can meet them for, happy hour even, or whatever that looks like for you, being able to sit across from the table from someone and tell them how grateful you are for them is one of the most powerful exercises you can ever do. But if not, maybe you could do like FaceTime or Skype or like a Zoom conference. I actually do Zoom conferences with some of my colleagues and some of my best friends now, because it's a nice way to have everybody's face, and it's just like a nice way to check in. We're kind of all over the place. So it could be really useful for you in that sense. If not, maybe by phone, or even if that's not available to you, just writing a letter. And I really just want you to tell this person why it is that you value them, and then to celebrate that person for all that they do to bring joy, comfort, love, support, perspective, whatever it is, into your life. I've done this before, and I really think that it's powerful. I think that we are hardwired for connection. Tom says that all the time if you've taken classes with Tom, but I honestly do believe that that's true. And going back to our very first week when we talked about one of the biggest stress responses from Lori McGonigal's TED Talk that she did. She talks about how we release oxytocin in times of stress, and that cuddle hormone is screaming to us to reach out to people who we love and care about to help support us. So I think this is a really awesome time to think about those relationships that do support us and being able to tell and celebrate them. So that's kind of the reflection. And the reflection piece is just, how do you feel after you connect to this person? How did that person respond? Just giving me a little snapshot of what that interaction looked like. And it can be as personal or impersonal as you want, but I'm just want you to reflect on that, because I think that it'll be really powerful for you. So that's it. The podcast, the surveys and questionnaires, if you want to take them, and I encourage you to, but obviously no big deal if not. And then the connection reaching out piece, that is for the reflection this week. So all this is going up. If you have any questions, as always, please let me know. I really think that there is value in learning as much as you can about who you are as a person. And like I said before, these surveys aren't perfect by any means, but sometimes a little bit of knowledge or something that you get from them just gives you some awareness to something you might not have even ever thought of before. And so I do find value in them, and I hope that you do too. So have a great week. I know that some of us are going into testing, so keep that mindfulness going. Maybe bring it into your classrooms. I think I talked about the brain and the amygdala, but they show that when children have that stress response from test taking, which happens all the time, their amygdala literally is like flipped out and it cannot connect to the higher order thinking skills. And one of the best ways to calm that amygdala before testing is just doing some deep breath work with our kiddos. So if you are doing PSSA tests this week, maybe allowing some space for your kids to just do some breath work would be really, really helpful, getting them to calm down and show up and do their best. So wishing everybody the best of luck, and I hope that y'all had a very happy spring break. See you next week. Bye.